the other deck for today is the first prison deck on the channel. If you're not familiar with what a prison deck is, it basically means a deck that is aiming to severely or completely limit your opponent's options and thereby win the game. So you limit their options first, and then you have some kind of way to close the game out once they are in prison. I guess you could argue that the McGonagall deck that destroys your opponent's lessons is sort of a prison deck, but it's not really true prison because they can always get out of it by playing more lesson cards, at least in theory. So that is more of a soft lock, whereas this deck is trying to completely lock your opponent out. Okay, so let's have a look at what does our starting character do. Well, he provides us a Charms power. So same thing here as with the Hooch deck that I just showed. Because our starting character provides a kind of power, we can play two kinds of lessons and be reasonably certain that we will have all the power types that we want. Also, Flitwick allows us to once per game trade 2 cards in our hand for 1 card in our discard pile that needs Charms power, and it will become apparent soon why we want to do that. So this prison deck, I split into 2 phases, you could say. The first phase is trying to lock your opponent, and then the second phase is when they are locked. So the first phase, you're trying to get to 7 power so you can play your prison card. This is the key card of the deck called Deboning. It says that during your opponent's next turn, he or she can't use actions to play cards. So simply, they cannot use actions to play cards. Now, there are ways to get around this. If at least in my interpretation, for example, Fred and George Weasley have an effect that allows you to use an action to put a card into play, so you're not technically playing a card. That would get around this effect. But in general, your opponent will not be able to play anything and therefore be severely limited. So the idea of the deck is to play this card and then keep playing it every single turn by either getting a new copy or returning an old copy to your hand. And while you are doing that, you are developing your own board, putting creatures on the board, and spending time to get rid of any creatures they might have so that you can survive. So the first stage of this deck is playing power to get to Deboning. And of course, we need lessons to do that. So we are playing some Care of Magical Creatures, and we're playing some Transfigurations. We're playing more Care of Magical Creatures and Transfigurations because we actually have cards in the deck that discard our own Care of Magical Creatures. So the thought is that we need a few more of them. And then the other thing that really helps us get to 7 power is this Borrowed 1 card. So this is simply an item that provides 2 power. So this saves us a card and an action if we can get to Deboning with the help of this before they destroy it. Often they are not able to destroy it, and even if they do, we are playing 4 copies, so maybe we can replace it. But anyways, this helps us get to 7 power faster. So the rest of the deck is really all about when they are locked, which means the turn that we are able to play Deboning. How do we keep playing Deboning? So one of the ideas is that we want to be able to have more actions so that we have more time to play cards, because if we play Deboning every turn, that means we are going to we're basically wasting a card and an action every turn just to keep the prison locked. And to help us here, we are playing a location called Gringotts. It says each player gets 1 more action on each of his or her turns. And this is great because your opponent also gets an extra action, but since we are playing Deboning, they're not actually able to use that action for anything other than drawing cards. And so we are basically the only person that can benefit from this card. And also we get an action from this card the turn that we play it. So we can always, if we have this in our hand, we can always play this on the turn that we are aiming to play Deboning. So that's great. We also have a unicorn. This, I'm not sure about the numbers here. Like maybe you could refine this deck a little bit more and realize that you should play more Gringotts in it. I'm not sure. But unicorn is doing the same thing as Gringotts. It just requires more power to play and requires you to discard one Care of Magical Creatures lesson when you play it. So this one is a little trickier to fit into the same turn that you're playing Deboning, because you would need to start your turn with 7 power, I guess. Let's see, if you're at 7, you can play Deboning and this. Well, essentially, you wouldn't need to. Yeah, you would need to start your turn at 7 because you would lose a lesson when you play this. Whereas with Gringotts, you can reach 7 power on your first action, then play Gringotts, and then play Deboning. So this one is a little trickier. You need to be one action further ahead, but still, you can have multiple of these in play. So if you combine Gringotts and this, then you can get quite a few actions. And as soon as you reach more than 3 actions, you're probably in a really good spot. Now, we could play more Gringotts. The only downside of that is you can only have one of them in play because it's a location, and it happens to be a unique location as well, which is kind of redundant. But so if we draw multiple copies of Gringotts, we can't use all of them. So that's where we are playing fewer. The rest of the stuff in the deck that's not giving us actions, a lot of it is trying to get us to the next Deboning. So it means we have some cards that just draw us cards, like the spell card Outpost, aiming to draw us the next copy of Deboning or other card that helps us get Deboning. Then we have Gringotts Vault Key that can just search our deck for any card, which will typically be Deboning. So you can search your deck for Deboning, then play Deboning. Then we have Reparo, which gets a non-healing card from our discard pile into our hand. So we can take Deboning from our discard pile, and then we can play Deboning. And now we finally circle back to Flitwick's effect. Flitwick is able to return both Reparo and the Vault Key to our hands. So yeah, so essentially he gives us an extra turn of playing Debonings, and this is why he is our starting character of choice. He basically guarantees that we can reuse one of these cards one time. So buying us an extra turn is very powerful, and probably we will have 2 cards in our hand that we are okay with getting rid of once we are starting to use this effect. Then we have Scribblifors. This is basically used to, once they are in the lock state, we need to be able to get rid of any threats they have on the board. So we want to be able to get rid of creatures, for example, because while we are busy playing Deboning, if we're taking damage every turn, then maybe eventually we die. So we need to be able to get rid of the things that they have on the board that might be able to mess with us in some way. And Scribblifors gets rid of 2 cards. We don't really care which one goes to the discard pile and which one goes to the hand, because they are not going to be playing cards anyway, because we are playing Deboning again, so they are not able to play their cards. And you might ask why not Dobby's Disappearance. It's a really good card. The logic here is just that we want to be able to remove as many cards as possible per card that we draw, and Scribblifors gets rid of 2, whereas Dobby's Disappearance gets rid of 1. Yes, we could use Dobby's Disappearance for other purposes, but in this deck we figured that the most important thing is to get to the lock state as quickly as possible, and any card that doesn't help with that should not be in there. Things that we're using to remove cards needs to be as efficient as possible, and therefore we want the card that removes 2 copies rather than just 1. So 2 Scribblifors in the deck for this reason. This can also be recycled if you need to play more, if you need to get rid of more cards than just 2. Next one is color changing ink. So this is an item that if you have it in play, you can use an action to put your hand on the bottom of your deck and draw as many cards as you had in your hand. So once you have a bunch of useless cards, you can essentially turn them into a powerful draw engine that sort of guarantees that you get to the next deboning on your turn. So this is just yet again another way to be able to play your debonings. We have Hannah Abbott that similarly to Flitwick can return cards from our discard pile, but she can trade any 2 cards in our hand for 2 non-healing cards in our discard pile. So we are not playing more than 2 copies because we can only get one of her into play because she's unique, but she's incredibly useful because on her own she lets us play 2 more debonings. So we are basically buying 2 turns worth of time, which is huge. We are playing 1 Madam Pomfrey in case we are running out of cards in our deck. Maybe we would actually draw the rest of our deck before we're able to kill our opponent. Then we can get Madam Pomfrey out, shuffle some cards back, so that we have the time we need to finish them off. The rest of the cards is just Hedwig, that is like a Reparo in creature form. So she also deals a little bit of damage to our opponent over time, but the main way we're killing them is while they're we're playing Deboning against them, we have our Crazed Capybara that is dealing damage to them every turn. This one is also the minimum sunk cost for playing a creature because we're getting our card back. And since we cap at 7 power, we're choosing a creature that requires 7 power. So the deck, if it ever gets to Deboning, is really powerful. The main problem is that it's kind of a glass cannon. There is a lot of ways to disrupt it, as we will see in the matchups that are coming now against Hooch. You can mess with it by getting rid of the lessons and stuff. But if it ever gets you in the hold, then you are probably screwed. Although I will say it's not at all guaranteed. It's still a bit of a fun solitaire game for the prison player to actually keep the prison going once it's been established.